Hey guys, what's up? Welcome to this week's video. In this week's video, we're actually going to remake a previous video of mine, which is the setting up a third-person shooter template. Now, the reason for the remake is, there's two reasons. One, the original video's got some music, which I can't remove, which I think is annoying quite a few of you, so apologies for that. And the second reason is, with the addition to Unreal 5, this has now slightly changed. I'm going to keep the original video, and I'm probably going to remake the UE4 version without the music, and this one may be dedicated to going forward with UE5. There's actually a slight bug in the animation starter pack, so this is going to sort of serve as a bug fix for getting that to work. So, with that being said, what we're going to do is we're going to turn a first-person template into a third-person template. There shouldn't be any blueprint required. Everything that is within the first person template will aid us in creating the third person, so you shouldn't need to do any additions. So with that being said, one of the requirements for this is a third person model, which I'm going to use the animation starter pack. The animation starter pack is a brilliant little pack if you've never used it before. It's a third person character, and it is set up really for a shooter based template. As you can see, all of the characters in this all are holding weapons. And this covers stuff from rifles, shotguns, pistols, and there are tons of animations, and it's definitely worth using. So, if you've never used it before, it may say add to project or add to basket or download, something like that. If you've used it before, it'll say add to project like mine. If you haven't, press download and then it'll say add to project. We're just going to simply click and we're going to add this to our project. This should only take a few seconds. So you can see that it says complete already. Minimize that. Now, in the first person template, this is typically what happens. You spawn in, you pick up your weapon, and then you're good to go. However, for the third person template, we're not going to need this weapon because we're not going to do it this way, and we're ready to go. So, in your content browser, you can now see that you should have an animation starter pack. We're going to go into here, and you can see here you've got all the animations which you have available. You have deaths, you have equip rifle standing, shotguns, prones, idols, all sorts of stuff. There's lots of stuff for you to work with, but in this case we just want to get a character with a gun. And what they've done very nicely, they've already created a blueprint, which if I open this up, this is the UE4 ASP character, which is the animation starter pack character. If we go to the viewport, you can see we've got a third person model in a collider, ready, waiting to receive a weapon, and he's already animated. So you can see there that he's just stood idling, doing nothing, and this is perfect. What we're going to do is we're just going to tag this to the top. Now, just one extra little bonus there. If you want to prevent any of your new windows opening in sort of like a floating window, which I think is kind of like the default, what you can do is go to edit, go to editor preferences, and what you can do is you can change your asset editor open location to main window, and this will make sure that all your new windows always open as a tab like that. So that being said, you should have now your UE4 ASP character open, and if you've not already noticed, you'll notice some of these little yellow warnings. Now, these warnings are the bug fix, or the bug which prevents you from using this in UE5. So this is where we're going to fix it. So if we was to set up this character to be the class, which don't worry, I'm going to go over this again in just a sec. If we try and use this character now, I'm pressing W, A, S and D and it's not doing anything. The only thing you'll find that works is the jump. To fix that, it is because in UE5 what they've actually done in the input settings is they've changed the naming from like move forward to move forward and back, and we just need to make them changes. So to do this, what we want to do is we want to go to Edit, we want to go to Project Settings, and then on the left hand side under the engine, we want to go to Input. And then here under Bindings, you've got Action Mappings, which we want, and Axis Mappings, which we want to. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab this UE4 ASP character and I'm just going to drag this tab down just to the side, just so I can see both this, and if I make this just a little bit bigger, I make this window a little bit bigger, just so I can see these names. So here we can see an error. It says input axis event reference unknown, and the axis that it's looking for is move forward. So what we can see here is that in Unreal 5 they've actually rename this to move forward / backwards. So what we need to do is we just need to remove this / backwards and then remove the space between move and forward. And then similarly we're going to do this for the other ones which have been changed. So look up has been now changed to look up and down mouse. So we're going to get rid of that and down and the space. The turn right has been changed into turn right and left mouse, so let's get rid of that and get rid of the space. And then move right has been changed to move right left and remove the space. If we now hit compile, these should have changed. And which one have we still got wrong here? So let's just turn. So instead of turn right, it's just the word turn. Hit compile, they've all gone. So the only one that we've got left now is an action mapping. So input action event reference unknown, and the action is crouch. So you can see here the only action that we've got existing is jump and primary action. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to press this plus button and I'm going to change this new action mapping to the word crouch, and make sure just to capitalize the first C letter just so it matches this. And I'm going to change the keyboard binding to the left control. So I'm going to scroll down, I'm going to find left control, I'm going to click that. I'm going to hit compile now, and you can see that all of the errors have gone, and this compile button should now be a green tick. So because I have changed my character model, I'm going to press play, and you can see now that if I press W, A, S and D, I can move, I can crouch, and I can jump. So I can do all that. So if you're only here for the video for the bug fixing, that's it. Thanks for watching, and give me a like if it helped. For the rest of us, we're going to continue on now, and we're going to build out the rest of it and put the weapon in his hand, and we're going to get this functioning as a third-person shooter. So I'm just going to move this compile result a bit back down, and we're going to continue. So what I actually did, I've actually set this character as my player character. Now before I do that, what I want to do is I want to go to my content browser and I want to find the UE4 ASP character, which is in the animation starter pack. And what I want to do is, so then I don't change any of the existing code in here which makes it walk, jump and crouch. I'm never going to change this movement code, so I just want to protect that in a way, and I just want to build on top of it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open this drawer up and I'm going to right click and I'm going to create a child. Now what a child does is it takes everything from the parent and it uses that as sort of the starting place. So I'm going to call this one player B, and then I'm just going to double click and open that up. So if we look at the event graph now, this is completely blank. However, in the top right hand corner you can see it says parent class and it says UE4 ASP character. So everything this UE4 ASP character has, player B also has. However, you can't see it because it's kind of like its starting position. So it's almost like we're creating a brand new layer on top of the existing code. This is good for many reasons. You can't mess the old code up. So if you was to make a mistake, you're not going to lose that basic movement functionality. And also what you can do is you can still edit all of these bits and pieces. So you can change the color of your character if you want, you can change his material, you can change the mesh out, and you're still going to have all that movement component. but now what we can do is we can add on other functions like throwing grenades, shooting guns, sprinting, and all that sort of stuff. So you can do that. Anyway, so now we've done that, we can close the UE4 ASP character, and we're going to change which character loads in when we press play. So in UE5, you've got this list of blueprints available for editing. So this is a little blueprint button. We're going to click on that. And then under the project settings, you'll see game mode. Now, if you hover over it, you'll be able to edit it. And we're going to scroll down to the game mode classes, and one of them is pawn. The pawn is basically your character. We're going to hover over edit, and we're going to select a pawn class, and then now we should be able to see player B, or whatever name you've called your child. So let's click on player B, and if we press play now, you can see that we've still got a character which can move around, jump and crouch, except now we can make some changes to this for our liking. So I'm just going to switch over to the viewport, and with the mesh selected, I'm going to press add. I'm going to pick skeletal mesh, and I'm going to call this one weapon. Now this is where our gun's going to go. So over on the right hand side, with the weapon selected, you'll see skeletal mesh, and it'll say none. From the drop down box, we're going to press sk_fp gun, and you'll see that the gun appears at your character's feet. And then before we do any adjustments, where it says sockets, the parent socket, we're just going to press this little magnifying glass folder, scroll down, and we're going to select hand R. And what this is going to do is it's going to say, I want sort of the default location to be my right hand. So as you can see now, the gun is kind of, you can see now that the gun is kind of wobbling around with the character. So by parenting it, what it's actually done now is it's kind of mimicking the hand location. So we can do some final adjustments now. So you can either press these sort of movement tool buttons up at the top, or you can type in the numbers yourself, whichever is easier. I'm just going to make some adjustments. So first I'm going to rotate it around by 90 degrees. And now I'm going to press W, and I'm going to do some movement. So I'm going to move it forward. Up at the top here, you've got enable or disable grid snapping. So I'm going to disable the grid snapping, and I'm just going to make some minor adjustments and get this into place. So I'm going to move it forward just a little bit, and I'm going to move it right just a little bit. And you can spend a lot more time on this, but for me, that's close enough. I'm not going to be paying that much attention to it. And now I'm just going to re-enable the grid snapping. So what we've got now is we've got the character with a gun in his hand. I'm going to hit compile. Now I typically like to hit compile every time I've sort of made a successful change. I don't typically press save because I can reload, but that's something for another video. So typically third-person shooters don't have the camera directly behind the character. At the moment, the camera's right behind the character, and I can't see the gun, and my character's really blocking everything that we do. So what we're going to do is we're going to select the camera. You can either do it by clicking on it in the scene, or you can select player camera from the components list on the left. And I'm just going to move it over to the right by about 70, and I'm going to move it up until it says 70 again. But the actual location would be 40. So here for my location, I've got 70 on the Y and 40 on the Z. And if I hit compile and I hit play, I can see now that I've got a slight over the shoulder camera, and this feels a bit more natural for a third person shooter. So now all we really need to do is set up the weapon fire. So for this, we will need to go into the event graph, but don't worry, we're going to copy some code from the for the weapon. What I did there is I just selected all of these nodes. I'm going to press delete just to give us a nice blank canvas for us to work with. So this is where it is also slightly different, but it is the same, but it's slightly different. We need to copy the code from the weapon. Now, typically in UE4, we would be copying this from the first person character's blueprint, But this is all changed now, and all of the weapon fire is actually stored within the gun. So in your content drawer, if you go from your contents folder, you want first person, blueprint, and you want to select BP_rifle now. Now, if you're brand new to Unreal, don't worry about all of this. We don't really need to know much about this. This little bit of blueprint or code here is exactly what we need. So what we're going to do is we're going to highlight just this bit of code, and then we're going to hit Control and C, and we're going to copy all of that. We're then going to go back to our player B event graph, and we're going to paste. I'm going to hit compile and just see if anything complains at me, which at the moment it hasn't. I'm actually surprised that this projectile offset hasn't complained, to be honest, which is unusual. I'll be honest, that's unusual. It usually does. But this spawn actor BP requires an input to actually fire. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to drag off this, and I think it's called primary action. So there we go. In UE5 it's called primary action. In UE4 this was just called fire, but it's primary action. So we're going to select primary action, and I believe this is linked up to when we press the left mouse button. I'm going to hit compile, and I knew this was going to complain. I was just surprised it didn't complain earlier. Okay, so the skeletal mesh is expecting to be the weapon. So what we're going to do is we're going to delete this, and we're going to grab our weapon and we're going to drag that over. And then projectile offset. We don't have one of these just yet, but we're gonna make one. So if we go back to our BP rifle, our projectile offset is just a vector, and it has these numbers setting it up. So we've got 100 on the X, 0 on the Y, and -10 on the Z. If we right click on here, we can copy. We're going to go back to player B. We're going to right click on this projectile. You might need to right click just off the text a little bit in this blank area. You can see now we've got an option that says create variable projectile offset. That appears here. If we hit compile, it'll allow us to change these default values. You can see here it says please compile. We're going to hit compile, and now you can see that they're all 0. If we right click on the offset and press paste, it is now put in the same data as was before. We're going to hit compile, and then we're just going to have a quick once over. So here we can see weapon, and it was saying get socket location ammo. So I'm going to assume there is a socket called ammo because it hasn't complained. Make a transform. We're going to spawn our projectile, and then we're going to play us out. So let's hit compile, let's play, let's see if that works. So there we are, we've now got a shooter. The only thing left now is to add a crosshair. Okay, so what we need to do to make a crosshair is we're going to go back to our first person map. We're going to open up our content drawer, and what we're going to do, we actually need to create a heads up display. So we're going to right click, we're going to hover over user interface, and we're going to select blueprint class, and it's not actually going to be in the common menu. We're going to go to the all classes drop down, and you want to type in the word HUD, and then you want to select the HUD or HUD. You don't want to select any of these other ones, it's this one that you need. I'm going to select HUD, and then we're going to put this one as main HUD and then class. What I'm actually going to do is I'm going to put an underscore there and then put class. Okay, and then we're going to open that up, and in the event graph what we're going to do is we're going to come from the event begin play, and we're going to say create widget. Now we've not actually created the widget that we want to add to our screen just yet, but we'll get to it. But when we do create it, we need to add it to our screen. So when we create it, it's going to be set here as a sort of value. We need to drag off that and go add to viewport. Now for this to be added, we need an awning player. So the easiest way for us to do that is get player controller, and that will get us as the first player, which is player 0. Now hit compile. We're gonna get an error because we've not selected a class just yet, so we can keep this open just while we do that. So go back to your first person map and open up the content drawer. We're going to right click and we're going to go user interface down at the bottom, and then we're going to want widget blueprint. And for this we're just going to select widget, user widget. Press select, and we're going to call this one crosshair. There we go. So what we can do now is we can go back to our main HUD, and under the class we can drop down and crosshair should be there. Hit compile, that error message will disappear, and we can actually close the main HUD. Go back to your example first person map again. Now under the blueprint menu, if we go back down to our project setting game mode, and what we can do is we can now change the HUD class. Go to select HUD and now select main HUD class. The reason that we've made a new one is because the default HUD isn't actually editable. It's just a placeholder so then the game can run. However, what we do want to do is we want to go back to our content drawer and we want to open up the crosshair. So now we're in here. What we're going to do is, at the moment we don't have any widgets whatsoever, but we're going to find an overlay. So searching the palette just above, we're going to type in over, drag that in. So now we have an overlay. And then the next thing we're going to want is a size box, so we're going to drag that in, and then we've got a size box. And then lastly what we need is an image, so drag that into our size box, and we should have a little white dot in the top. Okay, so our overlay should absolutely be fine with absolutely no changes whatsoever. Our size box, however, we're going to center horizontally and center vertically, and this will put it in the center of the screen. And we're actually going to override the width and the height, and we're going to set these to possibly 5. Let's see what 5 looks like. 5 might be a little bit too small, so we'll change that again to maybe 10 and 10. That might be too big. Let's have a look. If we now hit compile, you'll see we've just got a little white spot in the center of the screen. If you want to change the color of this, by the way, where it says brush, we can drop that down, and you can, color and opacity. That should have been obvious, shouldn't it? You can change the color here now to whichever color that you want, and that should be it. So let's compile and just make sure that it's there. So you can see that we've got a white square on the dot, on the screen, and this is going to act as our crosshair. All we need to do now is just set it up so that our weapon aligns just a little bit better with the crosshair, and everything should be fine. So for this, what we're actually going to do is we're going to go to our player B, where our shooting code is, and what happens is, the way that this code works is it gets our camera's rotation, and it uses our camera's rotation as the direction to fire a projectile. So what we actually need to do is we need to make some slight adjustments to this before we tell it to fire, just to sort of tilt it towards our crosshair rather than our camera's look direction. So what we're going to do is I'm just going to highlight this little dot here, get rid of that. I'm going to hold the Alt key and click on this blue line and get rid of that. And then I'm going to right click on the return value and split destructor. Now what that allows us to do is that allows us to tap into each of these values, and we can add or subtract a couple of degrees in angle, just to make it suit our crosshair and then we can make it back into a rotator and plug it back into these. Okay, so to start with, what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag off the roll and I'm going to type in make rotator. And you can see here that if we plug all of these straight back into this, we're going to get the same output, the sort of purple bluey looking rotator that we had before. So what we can do is we can connect these up to the B here and connect this up to here. And then essentially whatever changes we make before it gets to this is going to affect that rotation for us. So what I'm actually going to do is, just to start with, I'm not too certain what these adjustments are going to need to be, so this is going to be a bit of an experiment for me. But to start with, I'm just going to add, and I'm just going to add 5 sort of degrees to the pitch, or the Y, to start with, and I'm going to connect up the Z and just see what happens. What I'm going to do also is, just to make this look a little bit neater, I'm going to double click on this green line. This is what's called a reroute node, and you can use these either to reroute stuff to make it look nicer, or you can also branch off them to sort of like use the same value twice. So I'm going to hit compile now. I'm going to press play. I'm going to see that already that projectile is already flying a lot closer to that that crosshair. So the height there is much better already. We can adjust that just a little bit more. Now, I am going to say that this is a projectile, so it does get affected by gravity. So this is never going to be perfect. If you want it to be perfect, I would use a line trace. And if you're interested in a line trace, I would probably go back and look at one of my previous videos. I think it's the second or third oldest from this video, and the title's something like creating a crosshair or correcting crosshair for UE5, or adding a crosshair to UE5. It's something like that. I'll put a card up above now for you to click on. So 7.5 seemed to be pretty cool for the pitch. So now we just need to move it over just a little bit. So for that, I believe it's going to be the roll. So I'm going to add. Not too sure if it's going to be an add just yet. What I'm going to do at this point, I'm probably going to pause, just find some nice adjustment values, and then I'll come back to tell you what I found. Okay, here we are. We're back. It wasn't actually roll. That didn't make a difference because it was technically just changing the diagonal. It doesn't matter. It's not the roll. It's actually the Z value or the Z value, and I've adjusted this by 1. This really doesn't need that much adjusting. I'd be almost tempted to leave it as it is. However, if I show you this little 1 degree difference on the Z, you'll see here that at a distance that is fairly accurate or close enough to be in line with that crosshair. Obviously, again, with it being a projectile at closer ranges, this is not going to be too accurate. Alternatively, you could go back to your HUD class and move your crosshair over. However, I wouldn't recommend doing this because you want to keep your crosshair centered, probably for the best feel for the game. So at this point, what we've got is a way to slightly adjust the projectile to meet that crosshair. We've added a sort of temporary crosshair onto the screen. I say temporary. You can also adjust this to either be round, or you can add an image in here and mess with that. But you've got a third-person template with a crosshair, all working. And if you were here just for the bug fix and you've waited and you've got this far through the video, thank you. Anyway, I hope that was as much use to you as it was to me. If it did help, please consider giving me a like. Please consider commenting what you did like about it. If there's anything you feel I left out, or if there's something you want me to cover more, or if you ran into any issues, also comment down below. You can also chat with me in my Discord server. The link's down below. I have that on my phone, so typically I can get back to you a bit better on there. And that's it from me, and I'll see you next week in another video. Thank you very much, and goodbye.